Today is Monday, October 29th, 2007. I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma, interviewing Billee Fisher. My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library, and this recording is being conducted as part of O State Stories, an oral history project of the OSU Library. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, I'll tell you what, I want to tell you how old I am.
Please.
You know what? I'm proud to be this old. I was born August the 31st, 1915. So that was a while back.
That is a while back.
It wasn't yesterday, it was the day before.
And have you always lived in Stillwater?
No. After we were married, my husband was the construction engineer on the Tulsa airport. Because the airport at that time in Tulsa was about like Stillwater's is now. And can I tell you something a kind of lot very many people know about? But anyway, he was a civil engineer, my husband was. And I'm the only girl he ever dated. But anyway, he was with the United States Department of Professional Engineers. And we were sent to Tulsa for that they needed a bigger airport in Tulsa. And they did, like I say, it was about the size of Stillwater's is now. So we were over there, and it'd been worked on probably 3 months, about that. And he got new specifications in, and that hardly ever happens after things are gone along in construction so far and then get changed. But they lengthened that runway a long ways, widened it, made it thicker with more concrete and more rebars, that's the metal things in it. And he couldn't understand that. And they were just almost finished with it, I think within maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And Pearl Harbor happened. And he always felt that someone higher up in the nation knew that something terrible was going to happen to the United States of America, and they need a bigger, stronger airport in the middle part of the United States, because there was no big, Dallas wasn't even a big one then. But that could be a little bit of history that, well, not everybody knows about, and it could be that the higher-ups knew that we'd better have a bigger, stronger airport in this part. And he was a designer and made sure they did it all exactly right. He did that with all his work. And he was in the University Architect's office as their construction engineer for about, 22 years, something like that. He was in charge of building the student union. I could tell some stories on that. And the library, I could tell some stories on that. And also that big high dormitory. Oh, I forgot the name of it. The one on the northest dormitory. But anyway, he just did a wonderful job. He was perfect in his work, but he gave up on me before we were married. He did. He never tried to correct me, but he should have. But he was a wonderful, good looking too. I've got his picture around here. Well, it's in there by my bed. Yeah. He was a good-looking guy.
Tell me about the student union.
About the student union?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, did you know that the highway from Ponca City came right down Washington Street, came right to where the campus is now, to 6th Street. It went east on 6th Street to Main Street, south on Main Street to 14th Street, quite a ways down. And Main Street, south of 14th, I can remember there was a big old house right out there where the street is now. And there were several houses in that area that had to be bought and demolished. But the highway then went on 14th east to Perkins Road, south on Perkins Road to Perkins. And I can tell you how Perkins got its name. Back in the run of 1889, there was a man, a senator named, his last name was Perkins. I don't know what his first name was. I did it one time, but I don't know. But anyway, and so they named that little town Perkins after the senator that helped get this area, this part of Oklahoma, open for settlement and the land runs. And both sets of my grandparents were in the land runs.
Wow.
Yes, and they would tell me stories about it, and I can remember a lot of them, a lot of those stories. But they were wonderful grandparents, and I had wonderful, wonderful parents. And my daddy was in the Payne County Sheriff's Office a long time. And I guess I'll tell it, yeah. It was a long time ago. That was during the days of Prohibition, when whiskey could not be made or sold. And he was in the sheriff's office, you see. They're in that building that's there now. And his office was in the very ground floor, the very northeast corner of that building. And anyway, somebody must have told him something. And I was in about, I don't know, second or third grade. Anyway, I went to school at Jefferson School, which would be between the 3rd and 4th Street, east and west, on the east side of North Main Street. And that was a grade school called Jefferson. Oh, and I was never a very tall person. And I always got to sit in the front seat, but maybe it was because they could watch me better. I don't know. But I always got to answer the telephone when it rang, because the principal's office was just right next door, and I could hear the phone. And that was a fun thing for a kid that age, to get up and answer the phone in there when it rang.
What happened in Prohibition? You were about to tell me something, and you got sidetracked.
About what?
During Prohibition with your dad?
Oh, okay. Well, my grandparents homesteaded on this 160 acres of land on the east-west Meehan Road, and it would be 2 miles east of Perkins Road and on the north side. And then my daddy bought out, his brother and sisters bought out their interest in that as they inherited it. And then he bought the other 160 acres. So he owned that mile through there on the north side of Meehan Road. And evidently somebody knew he owned it, because he came and got me out of class. I was in about the 5th grade or something like that anyway. And he said, "Babe, do you want to go out there with me?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And I went out there with him, and he had a great big axe. Have you ever seen a picture of a whiskey still? Well, they had great big round barrels, about this big around, and then corn and other stuff over here and something else. And then they had kind of a pipe that went like this around in circles and then down in, and that was distilling a part, and it'd go into this big thing over here as whiskey. And he took that great big axe out there, and he said, "Watch me now." And I remember it like it happened today. He took that big axe and he went boom, 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 and broke up all, and that whiskey just ran out all over the ground of those trees. There's a lot of trees around it, kind of. And I think somebody knew that he owned that. Reason they thought, well, they could put their still there and it wouldn't be found. On the sheriff's office, whoa. But it was found, and he broke it up, and I can visualize it right now. Oh, about 85 years ago, or 86 or something like that. I remember it.
Wow. Now, you told me a great story about Pistol Pete and the student union. Tell that for me.
Okay. Well, when my husband, my Bill, came back after he got his degree here, we were away quite a while, and then he had a chance to come back here and be in the University Architect's office. And we bought a house in Perkins because my parents had moved from Duck Street to Perkins to be near my grandmother so they could take care of her, just a block away from her. And so when we came back, we bought a house in Perkins too, and my husband commuted up here to campus. And we bought a house just, It was just a block from where my grandmother had retired in Perkins. And I know a lot of Perkins history too. But anyway, it was kind of an interesting place. But they bought that a fourth of a block through there, the northeast quarter of that block. And it has been sold off. My grandmother then received the block on the east. And people didn't have indoor bathrooms then. And so she had an arbor leading from her back door, almost close to back door, almost half a block back, and the outdoor toilet was out there. And she had bricks put down for a sidewalk underneath that arbor like this, you see. And I remember when I was a little kid, we'd go down there. We had an indoor bathroom here in Stillwater, but she didn't have the facilities for that in Perkins. And I can remember I'd run down on those bricks down there and run up and grab them. I like the green grapes, and I like the purple ones too. And we always called her our grape grandma because she had grapes. And she had great big, beautiful rose bush near her front door. And that rose bush had come, and the lilacs too. She had lilacs, and I've got some out here. And that lilac stock came from England in 1812.
Wow.
And has been in the family, first from Connecticut, and then in Kansas, and then in the land runs into Oklahoma. And they planted them out here on the where my grandparents homesteaded. And so then I got some of that, and it's right here and right back. And I volunteered for many years down at the museum too, Schreier Center. And I took some down there and told them, and that was all typed out in a little sign put on there where it came from and when.
Wow.
That lilac stalk. And my grandmother had these climbing red roses there on her front porch. I'd go down there to visit her. She was fun. And I'd break off one of those big old long thorns and put it on my nose and act like I was a rhinoceros. And that grandmother saw Abraham Lincoln when after he was assassinated. You know, his body was put on this big train and brought back to Illinois, where he is buried. And but anyway, her parents they lived in Illinois then, and they took her down there and to the railroad station, because stop at every one. And they lifted her up, she said, so she could look down and see the corpse of Abraham Lincoln. And she said that was one of the highlights of her life.
Wow.
Real history, you see.
What's one of the highlights of your life?
Oh, I guess meeting that Fisher guy. Well, he put up with me for 61 years. But he never did go with girls, because his older brother was crazy about all of them, and that just made him the opposite way. Can I tell you how we did finally meet?
Sure, please.
All right, because my older sister had a farm out on east-west Meehan Road and north about a quarter of a mile, and they had great big pecan trees there, and our Methodist Youth Fellowship would go out there in the fall and pick up big sacks like this, full of pecans, and our church would send them to an orphanage in Ohio. And that was good because they didn't have the pecans in Ohio. And so my Bill thought, that was his name. Wilbert was his name, but everybody called him Bill. So he was Bill and I'm Billy, and our son is Bill. But he thought that was a good thing, so he went out there with us that time. There's, probably 18 or 20 kids, young people. And we went out in the back of a big cattle truck. One time I ever rode in a cattle truck. But it held all of us, you see, and had that great big things around the side so we couldn't fall off. And we went out there to my sister's, and we took a picnic supper with us. And we picked up pecans, and we ate out there and had a picnic. And that Bill Fisher climbed a tree big old pecan trees to shake down more pecans because we got them all picked up that was on the ground. And he saw me down there on the ground, and he started throwing pecans at me, and he hit me several times. And I looked up there, well, hey, you crazy guy, what are you hitting me for? And I thought, hey, he's kind of cute.
And the rest was history?
And when we got back in that cattle truck, we picked up, I forgot how many big sackfuls of pecans. The church did send them up there. But when we got back in the truck, he got back in the truck next to me and sat by me on the way back in. And then, see, that would probably been in September. And then we had a big Christmas party at our church, in the basement of our church. And do you know about our Methodist churches here in Stillwater?
No, ma'am.
Well, let me tell you this real quick. But you see, you know where the Methodist church is? They're on 6th and 7th.
Yes.
That was the North Methodist Church, because they had feelings with the Confederacy, the Union. And the South Methodist Church was across the street on 6th from the northeast corner of the courthouse square. And it was a beautiful church building, big tall panels in front and everything. But it was a South Methodist. But our church was a United Brethren Methodist Church, because our people, church people, didn't have strong feelings either way, because we were united now in our country. We were united. So we were United Methodist Church, United Brethren. And that's where we all went. When my folks went and my husband's folks went, they were in the same Sunday school class, my parents and his parents.
Now, how soon after the Christmas party did you...
Well, evidently he was talking about it to somebody. And we had, I was still in high school, and they had, I was just standing over here in a certain place, and guys kept coming over and looking up, and pretty soon they had a hold of that Billee Fisher, one on each side, and they drug him over there, and they said, go ahead. And he said, no. They said, go ahead. We said, go ahead. No. You'd better. And I said, well, what did he better do? And they looked up above, and there was another college student standing behind me holding a big sprig of mistletoe. That's why we keep one up there now. See it?
Oh, wow.
Only that one's artificial. That was a real one. And they said, go ahead. And they made him kiss me. That was the only time he was made to kiss me.
Now, did he attend OSU?
What?
Did he attend Oklahoma State,
Oh,
Oklahoma
yes.
A&M?
Oh, yes.
What years did he
But
attend?
my parents first sent me to school in Missouri to get away from that Fisher boy.
Oh, yeah? It didn't work, did it?
Didn't work, and they were glad it didn't.
Where did you go to school in Missouri?
Drury. And I did, well, there'd be some handsome young men come by and get me and take me to class, but I wouldn't date any of them, because I kind of liked that Fisher boy back in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
And was he going to college then?
Uh-huh.
And what was he studying?
What?
What was he studying?
Civil engineering.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then they let me come back home, and every time I eat a cantaloupe, I think about it, because we did elope.
Well, I've never heard that, but it makes sense.
But he borrowed his uncle's car, because kids didn't have cars then. And we knew if we would ask, our parents, they'd say no. And they would. They thought we were so young.
Right.
And so we went down. He borrowed his uncle's car. And we went. We didn't want to get married here in Stillwater because it'd be in the paper, you see. So he drove down to Chandler. And we had to look around for a church. But he thought, well, I've got to get a license. We didn't think about that even. And that where to get that license was up on the 3rd floor of that courthouse in Chandler. And my feet wouldn't take me up there. So he went up and he got the marriage license for both of us. Then he got back in his uncle's car and drove around looking for a Methodist church, and went next door, thinking, well, that's where that's where pastors always used to live, was next door to the church. They don't do that anymore, but that's what it used to be. And so we went next door, and sure enough, that was a pastor. We told him we wanted to be married, and they said, well, where's your witnesses? We didn't know you had to have witnesses. And I've got a copy of that marriage license up there in the hallway. I've got a lot of pictures in there. And so he got the witness. We found the church over there, and they married us. And I think they knew it was right, because we were very happily married for 61 years before he passed away.
What year did you get married?
Where?
What year?
Oh boy, 1934.
And how old were you, and how old was him?
Well, girls had to be 18, and boys had to be 21. And so he'd been 21 for 2 weeks. But we knew it was right, and it was.
And what did you do after you got married? What did you do after that? Did you go to school?
Yes, I had interior design was my major, and his was engineering, civil engineering. And so we stayed out a year and saved some money, and then he had wonderful parents, and so did I. But they had a big house on the corner of 3rd and Husband, and that big house is there. There were 6 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms down. But they had a big family. They had 7 children and 2 grandmothers and an uncle living with them. And that's where they lived. And then when we married, then we were out of school a year, and he worked as an engineer in a seismograph. You know what that is?
Is it earthquakes?
Yeah, that's a good description.
Monitoring the earthquakes, or?
Well, see, they'd dig a hole down and drop dynamite down in it, and then they would measure out so far from that dynamite hole and put instruments all along.
Okay.
And then they'd set off that dynamite down there, and that would record how long it take the shakes to get out there to each one of those instruments. But that's what that is.
Now, who is the dean of the School of Home Economics? Who was the dean while you were there?
Okay, I got to tell you. Her name was Nora Talbot.
Okay.
And you see, Washington Street was a highway then. And it was on the, I don't know what the building is now, but it's on the east side of the highway.
Okay.
And Nora Talbot was very tall and a lot of big white hair like this, you know. Oh, such dignity, you know, because her students didn't have much dignity. But anyway, one time in class, somebody came running in there to tell her something. And she said, turned around and said, goodbye, and ran. We couldn't imagine her doing that. But you know how kids are. I followed her. She went downstairs, and on the first down floor was a nursery for people that bring their children, their little ones up there, preschool. And she was down there on her hands and knees with a lot of paper towels. And one of those little kids had gone to the toilet on the floor down there. And she was down there mopping it up with paper towels.
Wow.
She lost her dignity to us. Oh, that's something I'll never forget.
What else do you remember about studying in the School of Home Economics?
Oh, well, I remember an awful lot because we just had everything that we needed. We had all kinds of refrigerators, all kinds, and we had to learn how to put the big pan under the one that had ice in it that would melt and run down into that big pan under the refrigerator. And it looked like a beautiful piece of furniture. It was wood. Might have been walnut, ones that my folks had. And we'd forget to empty that. And so what my daddy did, he was a smart cookie. He drilled a hole, put it on the outside wall, and drilled a hole through the wall and put a piece of garden hose on it. And then my mama planted flowers out there. So as that ice would melt down, it would go through that little hose and water the flowers out there.
Wow. You didn't have that luxury, though, on campus.
What?
You didn't have that luxury on campus, though.
No.
They made you empty it? What else? Describe what else was in the classroom for me.
Well, how Stillwater got its name. Did I tell you that,
You
Evan?
did not.
Well, this is one of the stories, and I think it's true, because following the Civil War, the big cattlemen were in Texas. And to make any money, they had to sell those cattle. And they had the cattle runs. You've heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
We see they were just almost up I-35. This side of I-35, not very far. They had thousands of head of cattle. The cowboys would drive north to the end of the railroad in Kansas. And that's the only way they could get them to market and make any money. So the cattle, and the drover was a head cowboy, D-R-O-V-E-R. But anyway, as they'd cross the Cimarron River down there in dry, hot weather, they'd need a lot of water. They could not drink that water in the Cimarron River because it's salty. It runs through the salt plains out in western Oklahoma. And they couldn't drink it, and they'd be thirsty in hot weather. So they'd get across the Cimarron River, just barely across, while the drovers would say, all right, let's start pulling a little east right here because there's still water there, and they'd point. And it's not a town here then, but there was still water here where there wasn't somewhere else. And that is because the Stillwater Creek is fed with springs. It didn't depend on rain at all. There'd still be water here where there wasn't anywhere else. And they'd say, all right, let's go a little east. There's still water there, and would point. That's how Stillwater got its name.
Wow.
And that might be true.
Yeah.
It sounds reasonable.
So, the college wasn't very big back then.
Oh, I tell you something. Because, towns were always by the railroad track.
Right.
And I remember my daddy saying when they built Old Central, which was the first higher education building in the state of Oklahoma, was Old Central. And people would say, what in the world they build that college building way out there in the country for? And it would have been in the country then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there was a creek over there by Perkins Road over there. And where Perkins Road, there's a bridge not far from the depot. And I wish somebody would check this out for me, because one of my friends, she lived about half a block from me. We were about the same age. And her daddy worked in a mill there, a flour mill. And people would bring their wheat and even their corn, they'd make cornmeal, to that mill. And they would grind it all down and hook it up in something, I guess. It seemed like it was a cloth sack. I think it was. But anyway, I wish somebody would check that out, because why would they build that mill on a creek bank if it was not a big water wheel that turned the machinery in that mill? Mm-hmm. It sounds reasonable.
It does.
That it had been a water wheel mill there, and somebody ought to find out for me, because I'm curious. But I think it must have been. And my daddy said when he was a kid, and he said there was a creek that runs through there, still does, and he said they'd go down there and they would jump in that creek because there's great big catfish about that long lived in that creek. And they'd go down, they'd dive in and get those catfish and drag them out. And then, what did he call that? Anyway, they'd put them on some kind of a stringer and take them home. Now that had a special name of diving in and getting fish. Can't think what it is.
Somebody just told that to me the other day, and I forgot what it was. Somebody just mentioned that to me.
Well, that's what my daddy did in that creek there on Perkins Road.
Now, what did your dad do?
Well, he was a sheriff.
He was a sheriff
for years. And I told you, didn't I, about going up there and sliding down the banisters?
No, you did not.
Oh, well, I went to Jefferson School. I told you where that was.
Uh-huh.
And so I would go back over to the courthouse. It wasn't very far. So I could ride and play around in the courthouse till I could ride home with my daddy. I loved my daddy. He was a wonderful man. And I would slide down those banisters. You know what the courthouse looks like inside?
No.
Oh, you should. It's all marble inside. And they had steps about this high going up the second and third floor. And the banisters were about that wide, and it was all marble inside. So I would go there and slide down those marble banisters and play around in that courthouse till my daddy could leave his office and we'd go home. And about 2 years or so ago, my granddaughter was visiting me, and I was telling her about it, and she said, "Granny Babe, let's do it." And we did.
No, you did not.
I did.
You did not. Wow.
And she did too.
Keeping the tradition alive.
I'd probably do it again if I was there. Because that was fun. See, we were so slick.
Uh-huh.
And they were wide, so I couldn't fall off.
Sure.
And they were slick and boo, boo.
Tell me what else you remember about the campus.
The
buildings
campus?
on the campus, since your husband was so instrumental in helping some of those buildings get being built.
You know where Theta Pond is?
Uh-huh.
You know why it's Theta Pond?
No.
Because the Theta fraternity was across the street south on College Avenue. Well, it's University Avenue. It used to be College Avenue. And see, that was a highway down Washington Street, right through campus. It was a highway. And it was a custom then, when newlyweds got married, why, they'd have a chivalry. Have you heard that word?
No.
Chivalry. I think it was Chivaree. They'd go to their apartment, all their friends would, and make a lot of noise and sing and yell and scream and go around their apartment. And then the newlyweds would have to come out. And then the guys would kiss the bride, and and the guys would kiss the bride, and the girls would kiss. Anyway, that was a chivalry, and it made a lot of noise. And so that's what they had, a chivalry for us. And then the custom was to take them down to Theta Pond on campus and throw the groom in the water. And that year was a very dry year. We had in Theta Pond, about that much water. No, about that much mud, about that much water.
Wow.
Because it was a very dry year. That was back in, well, you've heard about those years. Mm-hmm. Well, that was that kind of a year. And they threw Bill in, and they said, "All right, babe, go get him out." And I said, "Okay." And I went in, I got all covered with mud, and they ran off and left us there. He was wet all over and muddy, and I was pretty much that way too. And then there was a young woman that liked his older brother real well, and she had a car. And we weren't about, probably, we weren't real central yet anyway, but almost south of it. And she came back and got us. We got in her car and got it all muddy and dirty. And there used to be great big white swans on Theta Pond. And I haven't been by there in quite a while. I don't know if they're still there or not.
There are a few, but they're not that big.
Oh, and they look so beautiful floating around on Theta Pond. Yes. And then they had a big shower for us. And some people brought dishes because they knew what we had done. You know, we had eloped because we could.
Right. Cantaloupe.
And so we had a very big shower. And then they had another shower for us of canned goods. And our friends took all the labels off those canned goods. Can you imagine that?
It's always a surprise.
And so a lot of times for a meal we'd have pork and beans and pork and beans.
Now I heard you saw Frank Eaton, who became Pistol Pete.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What did he do in the student union?
Why?
What did he do in the student union?
With the students?
Yeah. What did he do?
Well, you see, I with 3 sons, I was Cub Scout den mother 5 times. And some of my den little Cub Scouts are still around, and they call me at and keep up with me. And I think that's nice. One of them's a banker downtown. Now, I've known him since he was about 7 or 8 years old. But anyway, it was a fun thing for me to be a Cub Scout den mother.
How many kids do you have?
Why?
How many kids do you have? Children?
3 sons.
3 sons. And how many grandchildren?
3.
And how many of your sons went to Oklahoma State?
3.
3. All 3 went? Wow.
Well, see, their daddy had an office there for when they were in school, too. And, yeah, we came in 3s.
Tell me about Pistol Pete.
Oh, well, you see, I told you about being Cub Scout den mother.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever been to Perkins? He has a museum where he lived. Have you ever been there?
I have not.
It's an interesting place because it was left like it was when he lived there.
Wow.
And see, what I've been back down there 2 or 3 times, and it was just like it was when I'd take my little Cub Scouts over there. And he'd tell them stories, and those, boy, probably in their late 50s and early 60s now, but they remember a lot of those stories that Pistol Pete would tell them. And he'd try to teach them to rope. Well, I don't think that any of them ever learned to rope, but they do still remember some of the stories. And that was when Pistol Pete was up in the French Lounge. I told you about that.
I want you to tell. You didn't tell me today. I want you to tell me now.
Well, the French Lounge is on the 2nd or 3rd floors, according to what you count floors in that. And my husband was a construction engineer on that building. But anyway, the real Pistol Pete was up there one day, and he must have been in his 90s. But anyway, there's about 14, 15, 16 students up there with him. And one of them said, "Well, Pistol Pete, we heard you're quick on the draw. Are you still quick on the draw?" He said, "I'll say," and he pulled that gun out, and it went off. I mean, those kids were out there like that. And it made a hole in the baseboard of the French Lounge in the student union. And so I look every time I go in there, I look in the base, but I haven't moved any furniture yet to see if it's still there. But that didn't even make the newspaper.
Wow.
Because that was Pistol Pete. But it's worth a trip to Perkins to see his museum. It really is. Because, you see, he had a very official position. He was a United States, what?
Marshal.
What?
Marshal?
Marshal? Well, he was a marshal, but I think it was called something longer than that. I ought to remember, but I don't. But anyway, we knew that guy, and he was one of a kind.
What do you remember about the library?
The OSU library?
Uh-huh.
Well, my husband was a construction engineer on that. And you probably remember reading in history where people had to find water when they came in on the runs of '89. They had to have water first, and they didn't have time to dig a well a lot of times, and so they'd build their log cabins by a creek or a spring. And then there were some people said they could find water by dowsing. Have you heard that word?
No.
I don't know how to spell it, but I'm guessing DOUSING. But they'd walk along with an elm branch, and when they got over water, it would dip down, they said, and that's where they dig. They probably didn't need that, but that's what they thought and said. And so when my bill was doing some surveying to build a library on campus. See, now remember that used to be the highway up Washington. And he thought, well, he looked around here and he said, well, now, there ought to be some water lines through here somewhere. And he said, there ought to be here, through here or here, to get water to this building or that building, so he'd know what to find that, so he wouldn't have them dig down in and break a water line. And there was a student there, was helping. He was a student engineer. And he said, oh, my grandfather used to douse for water. And my husband, oh, yeah. And he said they did. And there weren't trees around there then like there is now either. And he said, I know what, I've got a coat hanger out in my car. I will go get my coat hanger and I'll douse for water with that coat hanger. And my husband, yeah, he was an engineer. And so that student was walking along there, closed off. It wasn't Washington Street anymore, the street was closed off. And that thing dipped down, that coat hanger dipped down. And my Bill said, well, all right, dig there. And they did, and they found water.
Wow.
He said, well, that's not because that coat hanger moved down, but and it probably wasn't, because that's about where it should be.
Now, you told me a story on the phone about not being able to wear pants in the library.
Oh.
Tell me that story.
Well, in the early 60s, dresses got very, very, very short. I mean very short. And that's when so many young women started wearing slacks. And but my daddy didn't ever want me to wear overalls or anything like that. He said, I want my little girl to look like a little girl. So I've never worn them, except once in a while. But this time I was going into the library to look up something about real estate or land or something like that. And as a student there at the door, south door, said, sorry, you can't go in. And I said, why? He said, you've got on trousers, and we don't allow women wearing trousers in the library. I said, oh, you're kidding. No, you cannot go in. So I said, all right. I turned around, went around back to my car, and rolled up those trouser legs, put my coat back on, walked back around, and he couldn't see him, and he didn't dare say anything. And I walked right in the library and found out what I needed to find out.
Now, you're the first woman realtor in Stillwater.
Yes.
How did you go into that type of business?
Well, because my major in high school and in college was interior design. And that kind of follows into real estate. And I've always been interested in land and property. I've always been. And so that I thought, well, you had to take a very hard examination. I guess they still do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we did that. We had to go to Tulsa to take it. And I passed it first time. And this fellow I was with said, well, a lot of people fail at a time or two. But it was so reasonable, all the questions were, it was easy to pass. And they were all so good to me. And some of them still take me out for lunch, those old timers. I don't know the new ones. But we were all friends then, we're all still friends. And that way we served the public better by being friends. We really did.
And who did you work for after you passed the test, right after passing the test?
Lloyd Doherty. And he was a wonderful 12 years younger than I. And we just got to be family. He and his wife, he has a beautiful wife, and he was a handsome young man. And 12 years younger than I. But anyway, he had a wonderful family. And we were a top agency because he knew all about making loans and making out all that legal paper stuff. Well, see, I didn't have to do any of that. All I did was show the house and talk to the people. And I got half the commission. And he paid all the expenses of my office. I had a private office and everything, you see, and everything. Private phone, all. And he paid all that out of his half. So, see, that was pretty good for me. Yes.
Did you think you had an advantage being a woman in the market?
I don't know. I never thought of it. But I talked to the people first and found out what their needs in a home would be. And I would show them houses that filled their needs. And that's about the only thing I ever went by, just to fill their needs. And I hardly ever had to show very many houses, because if I filled their needs with what they wanted and what they liked, why, that was it. It was that easy.
Yeah.
And it was easy.
And how long did you do that? How many years did you work in real estate?
18, I guess.
Wow.
And you know what? I sold a woman named Fisher a house when she came to town, and she found out I was having so much fun. She decided that she studied up, and she finally passed. And not long ago, she said, "You know what? I still make money off your name because people think they're calling you instead of me." I thought, "Oh, good, you want to share those commissions?" No. But they were ready to move away again. They thought Fisher, but it was another Fisher. But it was a fun thing to do. It really was. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But we were top agency.
Now, did your husband spend his entire career working at the university architect's office, or did he leave after that?
He retired.
Okay, but he did retire from the university?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And he retired, took early retirement, because we bought a lot of property in Arkansas. And we had a house over there on Beaver Lake. Have you ever been over there?
No.
So beautiful. And but we bought a house on the lake, and we were about as far from the water as from here, just on the other side of that hedge, right down in our backyard. We had 3 boats in our backyard. I've had a hard life. We only had 3. We had a rowboat that we could fish out of up close. And then we had a speedboat that we could ski behind.
Wow.
You know, one of those streamlined things. And we had a pontoon boat. And that was my favorite, because we could have 6 or 8 lawn chairs on that pontoon boat. And we'd have parties on that pontoon. In fact, I got a letter not long ago from some friends, and they were reminding me of that.
Tell me about the story behind Duck Street.
About what?
Duck Street? You say you know?
Oh, yeah, because the people that I lived next door, her name was Kenworthy, and she was one of my teachers in the 4th grade. And her name had been Duck. And when her parents got old, why, the Kenworthys brought the Grandpa and Grandma Duck to live with them, because they had a nice big house. And then they would try to tell me stories too, the ducks. And I lived on Duck Street, and the street was named for Grandpa and Grandma Duck.
Tell me, you told
One
me.
time I got a letter from a boy that I'd met down at OU in an art contest. And I got a letter addressed to Miss Babe Williams, 212 Goose Street. And it was delivered instead of Duck Street. Wouldn't have been now.
Tell me about Georgia Street. Is it Georgia Ave or Street?
Yes. We see a man named Paul Swim owned this farm right here. And that's why it's Swim Avenue up there. And there's Georgia down here to the south. And Mrs. Swim's name was Georgia Swim. And so when he developed this area, he named the street Georgia for his wife. And then Swim up there. And he borrowed my husband's surveying crew to lay his farm out into lots and blocks. And so he didn't work on Saturday or Sunday, so that's what Mr. Swim used him on Saturday and Sunday, to lay his farm out into blocks and streets and things. And so But then one of our dearest friends named Vassar, they have a big place in Perkins that makes farm implements. It's a big area, and Jack is still my friend. And his wife was killed by a drunk driver, and I just get on about right out south of Stillwater. Well, she wasn't. Well, she was killed. She lived about 18 or 20 years as a nothing, but she was breathing. And that awful that. And she had been an airline hostess before she and Jack were married. She was beautiful, wonderful. We were neighbors down there in Perkins when we lived in Perkins. And, I just feel like fighting when I think of a drunk driver. I think, if I was next to him, I'd. But anyway, that's how these streets got their name. And this Mr. Swim had named this street because we saw the plat. You know, that's a map, P-L-A-T. And he had this street named Broadway. And my bill brought me up here, and it had little yellow flags around showing where they'd been surveyed, and from here to here to here to here. And he showed me this lot. And he said, "You think that's a good one to build on?" I said, "Well, honey, if you think so, I do." Because it's small in front and big at the back. 90 across the front and 157, I think it was, across the back. And that's where our kids love to play, and our Cub Scouts and all that. But anyway, when he got the plat, he saw that this street was named Broadway. And he called Mr. Swim. He said, "I found out I want to buy that lot." We bought the first lot out here. "I want to buy that lot, but you've got that street named Broadway." Well, we're just not the Broadway type. And we're not. But he said, "Well, all right. What do you want to name it?" And my bill said, "Well, name it Crescent Drive. It makes a curve, a crescent to the north." So he erased it on their plat down to City Hall and let it in Crescent Drive. And then got ready to build. Why? They said, "Well, what's that number out there?" Nobody knew. So he called down to the City Hall again and said, "Well, what number would this be out here?" He told them where it was. And they said, "Oh, well, choose any number you want in the 1700 block." And he said, "Well, all right, I choose 1717, because our oldest son was 17 years old." So he chose 1717. And that's how he named the street and got the house number.
That's pretty interesting. Not many people could say that.
That's right.
Was it the same Swims that owned the swim store by campus?
They were, I think that was their son. One of his sons was Swim, named Swim too. But I forgot what his first name was. It'll come to me when I'm not thinking about it, because I knew him. But I know a lot of Stillwater history.
What else could you tell me about Stillwater?
Well, I remember down on South Main, people used to drive horse and buggies and wagons and buggies. And there was a great big red barn at being the 1000 block on Main on the west side. It was a great big red barn. And people would drive their horses and buggies into town, and they would park them there and tie their horses up in the barn. And that was there till, might have been torn down about the time I was married, or maybe right after. That big old red, and that should have been saved as part of Stillwater history. And there's a big house on Lowry. You know where Lowry Street is?
Yeah.
Well, it'd be east, you see, Main Street, and then Lewis Street, then Lowry, and then down to the depot down there. Well, there's a man named Lowry that gave some land to the city, and so they named the street Lowry Street, Lowry. And he had a great big beautiful house. He's a friend of my parents. And that house should have been saved as part of our history. It was because it was close to a railroad track, and that's where people used to want to be. Not anymore, but they used to. Mm-hmm. And that Lowry house, Chester Lowry. That's why Chester Street is named Chester. And Lowry Street is named Lowry. It was for Chester Lowry. And they were friends of my mother and dad's. And I'd been in that big, beautiful home they had. And it should have been saved. But it seemed like at that time all they thought about tearing down. But that's part of Stillwater history. So you know how Chester and Lowry and Duck was the name. And going to high school there where our library is. And we used to have concerts in a park right south of it. And we used to have concerts there once or twice a week. My parents would take me to that concert, and that was outside. And they had a big concrete bandstand, they used to call them, made of concrete. And it was about as far as from the front door to the back door and round, and concrete seat all around. And then the back of it was concrete. And the back of it, like this, back here, it was about that wide. And when I was a little kid, I'd get up on that and run around on the back of that concrete.
Wow.
I wouldn't do it now, but I did then. But it was so, and then they had great big, like a divan, made of concrete, big circle, this here and here, 3 of them. And they should have been saved too, because that was part of Stillwater history. And I think that bandstand and those seats should have been saved, because my parents used to take me to the Opera House.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Hold that thought, because I have to change out the tape. I'm going to run out of tape.
Did you know we had an opera house?
I did not.
Well, my folks used to take me to the opera. I had wonderful parents to put up with me like they did. But one time my daddy talked cross to me. Should I tell you about that?
That's up to you. I'm going to have you tell me about the opera, though.
Oh, yes.
All right, this is tape 2.
About the opera. Well, it is where the antique mall is now. You know where that is?
Mm-hmm.
On East 9th, on the north side. And oh, it was a beautiful building, inside and out. And they had the balconies around the top, just like we see in movies and TV now. That's the way and that should have been saved too. Instead of all that was torn out, and there was a furniture store there for a while. I don't know what's there now. Antique mall, I guess, just a lot of stuff.
What about movie theaters?
What?
What about movie theaters?
Oh, we had the Leachman in the 600 block on the east side toward the south end. And we had the Mecca, which means everybody come, and that was on the east side, right north of 8th. About that far north of 8th. And the Mecca and the Leachman and the there was another one. What was this name? Can't remember. But I'd go see Hoot Gibson, Tom Mix, and it cost a dime to go to the movies. But back in those days, a lot of people didn't have a dime for their children to go to the movies. Isn't that pitiful to think of that? But I told you, though, about Mr. Nichols calling and asking what groceries to bring.
No.
Oh, I didn't?
No.
Well, Mr. Nichols' store was right north of 10th and on the east side. And his name was Nichols. And it was Nichols. And he called my mother every morning and say, Mrs. Williams, is there anything you want on the morning delivery? And if there was, she'd tell him, and he'd have it delivered. And things cost practically nothing. A lot of things did cost a nickel in Mr. Nichols' store. And he called in the afternoon, Mrs. Williams, is there anything you want on the afternoon delivery? And if there was, he'd have it delivered. Times have changed. Because a lot of things, like I say, cost a nickel. But even when we were first married, our first grocery bill would be around $15 a month for Bill and me. And we bought everything we needed, chocolate syrup or whatever. That was probably the most expensive thing we bought was chocolate syrup.
What did you guys like to do for fun, you and your husband?
Like what?
For fun.
Oh, well, we'd go fishing. We lived up to that name. I'd go fishing with him, and he'd go shopping with me. Now, that's a good marriage.
Where would you fish?
Everywhere we could, because we had a car, and a lot of young people didn't have cars then. But we'd fish over here in Stillwater, this creek down here, and lots of times we'd go down to see my grandparents had homesteaded out there, and my daddy had a pond built and stocked with fish, and that's the land my son bought about a couple of years ago out there, and we'd go out there and fish, or wherever we wanted to go, we'd go, and that was fun.
Did you play card games at all, or?
Oh, once in a while I'd play bridge, but I didn't much like to. That would be the only thing I'd play. I don't like to be sitting still and thinking that long.
Did you ever go dancing or listen to music? Or?
No, we didn't know anybody that did.
Okay.
Oh, I'll take that back. One time, an aunt of mine out there on north of Meehan Road out that way, they had a barn dance. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Well, a lot of people had them then. And the barns had an upstairs to them where they stored hay, big barrels of hay, and had a nice, real smooth, beautiful floor. And when they used up all their hay, people would have a barn dance up on that second floor where the hay had been kept. And they called it a barn dance, and they did those kind of dances where somebody would sing a song and they would do motions that would fit the songs that somebody was singing, and they had violins and drums and things. And I went up there one time, but only once, because I didn't know how to do all that stuff they were doing, but it was fun to watch them. So I've been to a barn dance once, in a barn. And I like the idea of my oldest sister and her husband then moved back on my daddy's farm. And they had a big barn, big red barn, great big thing. And the west part of it was for their horses, and they had a door, and a couple horses come in from the north, and they had a manger through there. So I knew what a manger was when I'd hear the Bible stories. And then it was open in the middle part, and they had a buggy in there, and they just didn't want to throw it away because they had cars, but they had that buggy in the middle part. And then on the east side, it was all concrete base, and that's where they would drive the cows in, and they had what they called something, I can't think now. Anyway, it was boards that go like this, and the old cows' heads would go through that. And then they'd pull the boards together and hold the cows still while they were being milked. And that was concrete floor, too, because then they would wash out that concrete floor when the cows got through being in there to keep it clean. And they would have, I imagine maybe 8 cows in there, be about that size. And then they had another one that had boards across the door and a window on the side, big room. And that's where they came up when they'd have a wheat harvest. The thrashing machines would come up, and they would unload that wheat into that big room, and see, it wouldn't go out the door because they had the boards across it, and be wheat about that deep. And the next room had corn that they did the same way. And that was a wheat crib and a corn crib. Have you heard of a corn crib?
I have not.
Well, that's what they always called it.
Wow.
And great big red, painted red, like this, and then it went out like this. And that big part up there, they had to take down to get the bales of hay up in the loft where they'd have the dances. They didn't have dances, but other people did. And sometime when it was down in the big red barn, And my big sister that lived out there on the farm, we were in town, but she and her husband and children lived out there. When it was down, she painted a great big swan on that part of that barn that was down, and that swan's back of it was about as big as those doors over there, and then a big neck up like this and a head up there. And so it got to be known as the Swan Farm. They did not raise swans, but then because of that big red barn, they called it a Swan Farm.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 4 older sisters.
Wow. And what did they do? What were their, when they grew up, what did they become?
Mothers.
Mothers.
That's all.
What else do you remember about campus?
About what?
About Oklahoma State, the campus.
Oh, well, one thing I remember, I think I might have told you about this, about the dormitory.
No?
Well, this was back in the affirmative action days. And when everything had to have a certain percentage of black people. And this was my husband's apartment. That building was built. And when they got ready, the last thing they do, put on the bricks on the outside. Well, that contractor could not find enough black bricklayers. And so they stopped the building. Couldn't build it until they got a certain percentage of black builders. And and the contractor had to go ahead and pay all the rest of the guys until it was finished. And so that made that dormitory cost a lot more because they had to bring some black people in from, I think it was Chicago. I'm not sure, but I think it was Chicago that he told me. But what difference does it whether they're black or white? To me, that doesn't matter. Some of my best friends are black. That doesn't, the color of their skin doesn't matter. And I've got a handsome young black man that goes to our church, and I've known him since he was in high school because he used to come here and play with my kids here in this yard. And but I get hugs from him every Sunday too. And there's the most beautiful young black woman. We were all out to Parkersville yesterday. Have you been out there?
No.
That's an interesting place. Well, we had a great big dinner out there last evening. There was, I'd be well over 100 people were there, and a wonderful dinner in that big old barn out there. And one of our young women at our church has the most beautiful voice. And the people that came by and got me, they went by and got her. And she sang out there for us as part of our refreshment. Oh, she's got a beautiful, well, she sings at our church a lot too. It's a beautiful voice, and she's a beautiful young woman. Her skin is black, but that doesn't matter, she's beautiful. Inside and out. Yes.
Do you remember when President Bennett died?
When?
President Bennett?
Yes, because I was in school with his son.
What was it like in town when that happened?
What?
What was it like in town when that happened?
Well, wasn't quite out so far, but otherwise it was about the same. Because I went to school with his son Bill Bennett. And we were good friends, and he was dating a girl named Frances Corbin, and we'd tease him about it. And Frances lived on the corner, a beautiful home on the corner of B2nd and Duck Street on the northeast corner. Great big beautiful brick building. Beautiful big house. Her name was Frances Corbin, and she and Bill Bennett, we were all in school together. And she and Bill were married, and they still are. That was quite a while back. Oh my. I remember a lot of Stillwater history, but I think of that big old red barn down there on South Main. I like to think of that. And that house, $6,500. It'd probably be worth $260,000 now. I don't know how much it'd be worth anymore, but It's a beautiful home because I've been inside of it too. Beautiful, beautiful. But I think the city should have bought that home, make it part of our Stillwater history.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've missed out on a lot of things that way.
Sure.
And did you know there's a Eugene Field School here?
Tell me about it.
Well, that would be on West 6th, on the corner of Washington and 6th. There's a grocery store there now. And that used to be Eugene Field School, grade school. And then when that was sold and that other stuff built in, then they had built a Eugene Field on out west of there, about 6 blocks or so on the north side. Another school out there. But I like the way Stillwater got. Oh, did I tell you about this?
You didn't. Tell me about that.
Well, I'm a historian. But you've heard of a penknife that guys carry around to sharpen their. You get a little knife to sharpen.
Uh-huh.
You know why it's called a penknife?
No, ma'am.
I do. Because when they were writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, they used their pens were feathers. You knew that.
Uh-huh.
Well, and one guy was hired just to go around and sharpen that feather, because after it's used a while, it would go like this. See, a feather, because it's not that strong, you go like that. So they had this one guy hired to go around with a little knife, and when it got that way, then he'd sharpen there. And that's why it's called a penknife, because they sharpen pens with a little knife. That's why it's called a penknife.
Huh.
And you see, that's what this, you can see how that feather would, as it was being used, would go like that. So he carried a little knife, and that was all he did, was sharpen the pens with a penknife. And I don't remember where I got that, but I had to have it. Did I have to? Yeah. But that's my penknife, and that's why men carry a penknife.
Huh.
To sharpen pens with.
Well, what other stories about Stillwater or Oklahoma A&M you want to share with me today? Is there anything else we forgot?
Well, yes, I'm sure there is. Let me see if I seems like I wrote down a few things. Because I know a lot about it.
I know you do.
Well, one thing I remember about Boomer Lake, because that dam was built, and it didn't have the street across it then. It was just a dirt dam. And that's when we had that long, long dry spell that everybody knows about in history. But it went on. And the spillway was right by the bridge part now. And the spillway was shaped like a big funnel, about 30 feet across the top. And then it went down to about that big, and a pipe then out that concrete funnel into the creek, which you cross down right down here, the same creek. And but when it went over the spillway, that was a big thing, because it had dry weather for so great. And my daddy got me out of school to bring me out to see that water over the spillway, and it went over that big funnel and then down to the center, and there was so much of it couldn't drain out that way, and it started coming up. See, it went over and down, and it couldn't all get out that little pipe. I don't know how big a pipe was, but it went up about 10 feet in the air, over that, down that funnel shape, back way up in the air. And I can remember like that. It happened today, over the spillway. And water went across the street down here, down south of us, in that creek down there. And that was so exciting, because it had been built quite a long time, because that was in the dry years. And did you know that they built the shelter belt? You know about it? Well, north of here, up by Tonkawa, they built trees, a great long line of trees, probably I'm guessing 45 or 50 miles across up there. They call it the tree belt, shelter belt. And what that was supposed to do was when the winds came from that way and got those trees, it would turn up because of big trees, you see, and then that would make, in the moisture up here, make it drop.
Do you remember a lot of dust?
What?
Back in the Dust Bowl days, do you remember a lot of dust in town?
Well, that was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever remember any bad dust storms coming through Stillwater?
Oh, we'd look out and sometimes we couldn't see over 4 or 5 blocks. And we didn't matter to dust the furniture. Wouldn't do any good. Mm-hmm. We'd just almost get through it and be back again. And it made you feel bad sometimes to breathe. And that's why, anyway, my parents always kept all the windows and doors shut to help keep that dust out for the dust days. Oh, now I hadn't told you that time my daddy talked cross to me.
No, you didn't.
Oh, I want to tell you that because we had gone out to my big sisters that lived out on the old homestead. I think I told you my daddy owned that mile out there, and they lived on the farm and did some farming. And he worked in the oil fields too. Rusty is his name because he had dark red hair. But they had cows, and they sold milk in great big cans like this. And we were out there, and they'd make ice cream. They'd let the creamer come up. We'd make ice cream. And we'd go out there on Sunday afternoons, and for some reason, you know, the old ice cream freezers were made of wood about this high. And then had a metal can down in it with the real cream was in. And a big handle at the side, they'd go like this. And why, I don't know, but I always liked to sit on that because it was cold, I guess, because there'd be a gunny sack on top of the ice. And there was another little girl out there that day. I don't remember who she was. And I was sitting on it, and my daddy said, "Babe, get up and let her take her turn." Well, I didn't. And pretty soon he said, "Babe, get up and let her take her turn." I didn't, because I wanted to sit on it myself. That was my place. Because I was a baby and I was spoiled rotten. Still am. But anyway, finally, my daddy said, "Babe, get up." And I didn't. And he finally looked down at me and he said, "Babe, I told you to get up. You get up off of there and talk real cross." And I got up, because that's the only time my dad never had talked cross to me. And I went upstairs in my big sister's bedroom and laid down on the bed and cried. My daddy talked cross to me. Pretty soon he's up there and had me on his lap. And he said, "I'm sorry I talked cross to you." And I said, "Well, Daddy, I'm sorry I didn't mind you." And that's the only time he ever talked cross to me, because I didn't get up off that ice cream freezer.
What did your mom say?
Well, she probably was inside. I don't remember. I don't remember her saying anything or doing anything. But he knew where I'd gone upstairs in my big sister's bedroom and laid down in the bed and was crying and crying. My daddy talked cross to me. Can you imagine raising a daughter and never talking cross to her? Except good. One time when she didn't get up, didn't mind him.
That's pretty good.
And he was sheriff. I'm sure he didn't do the other people that way.
Do you remember the first time you rode in an airplane?
Oh, I remember that. The airfield was on East 6th on the north side. And they had a plane shield, big meeting here. And that was when there were 2 wings like this. Uh-huh. And then sticks up and down that way between the 2 wings. And so my daddy took us all out there. And he and my big sisters rode on that plane. It cost them, one at a time, cost them 50 cents. Right on. Well, that was a lot of money then. And but those pilots would walk along between those 2 out on the wings. See, they had the up and down things. And those pilots would walk out on that. And I thought, oh, that scared me. And I hope they don't fall off. And Dad said, no, see, they can grab a hold of those things. They won't fall. And then, anyway, he rode on it. And he took my big sisters. I said, Daddy, let me ride on that airplane. No, you're too little to ride on an airplane like that. And I didn't get to ride on that airplane. But I've ridden on them a lot since.
Was that the first airplane you ever saw up close?
Well, first time I ever remember seeing one.
Yeah.
And then there was that airfield out there on Meehan Road during World War II. And that was a mile and a half east of Perkins Road on Meehan Road on the south side. And there is a great big field out there just as flat and nice. And they had the concrete runways on it. I think they don't see them anymore. Maybe they've torn them up or maybe they just let grass grow over them. I don't know. But we'd go out there and Daddy would let me watch him take off and land. I loved that. And my oldest son has his own airplane. I like to fly with him. It's fun to fly with your son. He's a good pilot, but it's fun. He has his own airplane, and it is fun to ride with him. I think it holds 6 passengers. I don't know what kind it is, but it's blue and white. It's funny.
Tell me your children's names and what they're doing now.
Okay. My oldest son is Curtis Hoy, and Hoy is a family name. It's been in the family for 100 years, H-O-Y. And he's retired, and he has a home in Rogers, Arkansas, and one in Moab, Utah, and one in the Bahamas. And he's taken me those places in his own plane. That's fun. Fun to fly with your son. And he flies over here, and he was here about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, and his wife. And he's our oldest. Then our next son is Dave. His name is Davis after my father, Davis Allen. Everybody always called him Davy. And he lives in California. And he sends me tickets to fly out there to see them, but I do that, and then they come here too. But he is the one that had been in Southern California where the terrible things are happening now.
Oh, yeah.
And just recently they had moved back up north where they used to live. He said, we didn't like it down there like we thought we would. But from where he did live in Southern California, he said, no, I didn't visit him there. He said we could look out to the west and see the ocean not very far, and look to the north and see snow on the mountains in Southern California.
Huh. Wow.
And look to the southeast and see desert. But I didn't visit him there. I didn't particularly want to. But he'll be sending me a ticket, and so I'll be going out there because they're back northish again. And then our youngest son is Bill. And he has the most wonderful wife and daughter, and I have no idea what that daughter's IQ is, but it's way at the top. She's one of the smartest. Well, she's taller than I am, but how old is she? She'll have her birthday in November. She'll be 15. Yeah. And she and I have more fun together. We always have had. We used to play charades. She and I would. We'd act out silly things, and then we'd try to guess what we were seeing. But she is a beautiful young woman. Oh, she is. And I have no idea what that IQ is of that child. Oh, but her daddy is an importer-exporter. He's the one that has a room about the size of this, full of stuff. And I don't even know what they are. They're just machines, but he knows what they all are, and she does too.
Do you remember each one of their majors in college, your sons?
Oh, I should, shouldn't I? Well, Davies was in business, and Kurtz was in engineering, like his daddy, and Bill was, well, he went down to OU for 2 years. We couldn't hardly stand that, but he did, in business, and then back up here. We couldn't understand him wanting to go to OU, but he made such good grades, he got some kind of a scholarship down there. So we let him go, but we didn't like it. But he did. And he is tall. He's about 6'2" or 3". He didn't get that height for me. But I was a tall one in our family. Did I tell you that?
No, you did not. You were?
Yes, because there are 5 girls, a grandmother and a mother and 5 daughters. But they were all 5'2" or shorter, except me. I was 5'2.5".
Wow.
So I was a tall one, half an inch taller than the others.
That makes all the difference.
But I haven't shrunk. I'm grateful for that because I drink my milk and my orange juice.
That's important. Well, do you have any other stories you'd like to share with us?
Oh,
this
I probably
afternoon?
do. I probably do. I think I wrote down a list of things to tell you, and I don't know what I did with it now. I'm so forgetful. I didn't tell you about my colored glasses, did I?
No.
May I do that first?
Absolutely.
Look at him. That was one of our pastors, about John Ware over at Hillcrest, about 5 or 6 years ago. He said, "Well, Granny Babe, I got you some new glasses, some rose-colored glasses." He said, you use your glasses all the time. You see the world through rose-colored glasses. And I knew you'd worn yours out, so I bought you a new pair. I've been teased all my life, but they are rose-colored.
They definitely are.
Oh, I don't know about me. But this is a story that my brother-in-law, who was a band director, wrote. And I thought this is kind of cute. He says, see, my husband's real name was Wilbert, but they called him Bill. When Billy, me, and Wilbert decided to marry, they did it the intelligent way, went out of town and got the job done before Dad Williams or whom else could say nay. We did that, really. That big-hearted, prank-minded Uncle Earl Fisher offered the use of his car as his part. To report it as stolen was a trick he had planned, but was talked out of it by his own big, kind heart. We didn't know that until later. So, married they were, for better or for worse, in the middle of the Dust Bowl and Depression. Hitler in the offing, and Roosevelt was president with NRA, CCC, and more alphabetical progression. A good engineer with belief in himself made Wilbert an engineer with a WPA. There he taught broken men to have pride in their work, for those temporary work projects are still used today, and they are. They are. Sometimes I remember, those days back then, when Billy bought groceries and had change left from a 10. Less than $10 worth of groceries that Idabel's store sold was a lot more groceries than their car could hold. We lived in that little town of Idabel for a while. Bridges and culverts for Oklahoma roads, the dam at Denison, the rubber plant at Borger, runways at the Tulsa field. Those are a few of the things he engineered with the use of concrete and steel. The assembly line inspection for Douglas at Tinker was one of his projects, too. City engineer for Muskogee and architectural inspector for Oklahoma State U. With Wilbert building credits with excellent construction, Billy was building future credits with family production. First came Curtis, then Davy, and finally Billy Al. Plus painting, pottery, and real estate. Wow, you've been busy, gal. So the two of you, with family and friends, enjoy this special golden day. Just remember that you're living now, and this I just have to say. We'll all remember and laugh and cry for those years that went before. What we want you to do now, and we're serious too, get started on 50 years more.
Oh, wow.
Love, Harold.
And that was for your 50th wedding anniversary?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's nice.
And my somewhere else I've got another kind of like that, because see, we were married 61 years when he left. And
so he worked for the WPA.
what?
He worked for the WPA for a while?
Well, he did the engineering for the Works Projects Association.
What type of buildings was he involved with in building with that?
With buildings, several buildings, different buildings, and dams, lakes, and everything, because he was an engineer and he knew them all.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Any around here that we would still know?
What?
Are there any buildings left that we would
Oh,
still
yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah. 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 But I like that story of the library.
That was a good story. That was a good story.
They don't make girls do that anymore. But he didn't dare say anything when he couldn't see them.
That's right.
And they were rolled up. With a coat on, he couldn't see them. Oh, my. But this is a nice place right here. There's not another house built like this one.
And did your husband build this house? Did he draw the plans for it?
Uh-huh. And there's not another house like it. And I can tell you why. And he was here all the time it was being built. Like I say, he was a perfectionist and everything but me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, let me tell you this, that reminded me of that. But that old arthritis, drinking coffee. But it got so when I'd turn over at night, that would hurt him. And so he got sleeping in one bedroom, and I'd sleep in our old bedroom. And so I'd go in there and tuck him in at night and put his medicine there by him so he could sleep well and not hurt so bad. And I put his medicine there and reached down and kissed him good night and stood up. And he looked up at me and he says, "I love my cute little wifey." And I said, "I love you too." And I went back in my bedroom, and he went to sleep and went to be with the Lord that night. That's the last words he said in this world, that he loved me.
Aw. Well, I think that's beautiful.
I do too. Of course, we told each other that several times every day, but that was the last things he ever said in this world. He was saying to me.
Wow, that's nice.
And he was such a wonderful guy. He had to be to put up with me like he did.
Was he originally from Stillwater?
What?
Was he originally from here, Stillwater?
He was born over in Crescent, where another grandmother had done, because his daddy was he helped get this school of veterinary medicine started here at OSU. His father did.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh, because he evidently was a little bit of a politician, too, and a Republican politician. And he helped get this here, because he had something way up high somewhere.
Huh.
And he helped get it here.
Wow.
And we knew McElroy, I told you about knowing
You didn't
McElroy.
tell me about McElroy.
I didn't?
No?
Oh, well, he used to come to the Fisher house because he was a doctor of veterinary medicine, and so was my father-in-law. And my oldest brother-in-law, Leroy, was also a doctor of veterinary medicine. And so that's where McElroy would come, because a big family he liked to be around. And he used to live on East 6th on the south side of a big, beautiful brick home out almost to Jardo. Not quite, but almost on the south side where McElroy lived. He didn't live on McElroy Street. That'd been good if he had, wouldn't it?
It would be. It'd be fitting.
Of course, that street wasn't named McElroy then.
What was it called? Do you remember?
It might not have been there as a street. I don't remember. Because we were always over that way then. But I have a lot of good, happy memories.
You do.
And this you see this picture of this little doggy up here?
Uh-huh.
That's our Charlie. He weighed 10 pounds.
Oh, really?
And you know, that was painted for us, and he charged $300 to paint anything. But he didn't us. He was an artist for Hallmark greeting cards. That artist was. And he also painted that picture there in the hallway next to the corner. You see the flowers?
Uh-huh.
He painted that for us too. And I'll tell you how he got acquainted with us. Because, see, we had that house on Beaver Lake, and they had this man from Hallmark greeting cards, is who he was. And he was teaching some lessons out there, and I went out and took some watercolor lessons from him. And we found out he was staying in a motel. Well, we said, no, don't stay in a motel. We've got 1, 2, 3 extra bedrooms here, and we've got 3 boats in our backyard. You come stay with us. So he did. And then his wife came and stayed about 2 or 3 days with us, too, before it was about over. And that little Charlie weighed 10 pounds or so. And he'd stand on his back legs, like in that, and his hand, see how his feet would go like this?
Uh-huh.
Front feet. And that artist said, well, he's praying for the people who come to see you. And that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it does.
And he charged an outrageous price to anybody else, but he did ours for free. And we were grateful for that. But he was grateful that he had a place to stay instead of in a motel for him and his wife. And he liked to ride in our boats, too. And we wanted him to.
Well, you have quite a memory, and you
I've been
remember
blessed
quite a lot.
I've been blessed all my life,
Definitely.
starting with the parents I chose, and then the man I chose,
Definitely.
because I'm the only girl he ever dated.
Well, that's good.
And he never even thought about doing anyone else either.
Well, with that, I'm going to end our interview today. And
Why?
I'm going to end our interview today. And I do appreciate you speaking with us and telling us a little history about Stillwater and about the campus.
Sometime let's take a ride around over town, and I can tell you more about the town.
Definitely.
And did you know that the president of the university, Bennett, for instance, lived on campus?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that?
Oh, yeah.
Is that still marked off as his home?
I believe it's not there anymore.
Oh, I haven't been on campus quite a while.
I think it was a white framed house, I've heard. Yeah, it's been removed. I think they built the chapel over it. Chapel.
Oh, I need to go by there sometime and see. Yeah. But I'm afraid of traffic around that campus now.
Oh, it's crazy. It is crazy.
Oh, I remember a lot about that campus, and I could tell.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember Moore Hall. Is it still called Moore Hall?
Yes, it is.
I had my art lessons on the top floor of that building.
Did you really?
And it was way up there, 4th floor. It was in kind of the attic part. But it was worth it because I liked doing it. Oh, my. I've had a blessed life.